Welcome to Commander Central, episode 276, and today we'll be taking a look at some cards we like from the new Forgotten Realms Commander decks. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Chris, welcome back from your vacation. How's it going?
It's going. It's good to be back.
You showed me some nice sunburn you had acquired hanging out at the beach.
Yeah, it was a wonderful sunburn, the whole upper half of my body. It was great.
Yeah, that's a downside of vacation. You're out in environments you're not used to, and you occasionally get burned.
Oh, it wasn't like I wasn't used to it. Like, I can sit out here in Wisconsin, no problem, 8 hours, 12 hours, no shirt on in the sun, whatever. You get out to the beach where the ocean is, and it's a different sun out there for some reason, and I don't know. About 4 hours in, I'm like, oh my God, why do I hurt? This isn't right.
Yeah, you showed me, and it was like multiple days afterwards, and you were still pretty red.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah, that's rough. I've been there before, for sure. I'm actually, it's a miracle Max and I never got burned in Vegas by the pool.
I am shocked we never got sunburnt, but we wore sunscreen. We came prepared.
We did, yes.
But still, that's just a desert. You're baking like a cookie in an oven.
Exactly. Well, did anyone play any fun games or anything like that this week? Max didn't. I went to the shop. I know Max did not. Did you do any games at all, Max?
That's a negative from me.
I did see you're looking to build a new deck, though. You posted something on Twitter about that.
I am. I would like to have something ready for December, so, that gives me a good 4 months to get it done.
Okay, that's plenty of time.
For me, it's a little short, but I'll get it done.
I've ran my new Arden and on SCR deck a few times this week, and I've been very happy with that so far. I'm still tweaking it, but I've enjoyed it, so that's been a fun one to play. I don't think there are any particularly crazy plays this week. I played with the same person a bunch of games. There was a guy we used to play at the shop who moved over the course of COVID, so he left town and just was back for the week visiting, and so I hadn't seen the dude in like a year, and probably now won't for a long time because he doesn't live here anymore. So I played 4 games with him just to be able to do that, and all were really good. I just can't think of any crazy plays that went down. So. And I played a few games on stream, and I actually got quite a bit of Commander in this week, but I don't think any of it was that noteworthy. How about you, Chris? Have you got to play or anything? Or I suppose you just came back from vacation, you were just catching up.
Yeah, I haven't been able to play any Commander. I played Modern because we got a Modern tournament coming up in the cities that we're going to. So I was doing that, but I haven't been able to sit down and play Commander with anybody because just haven't had the time.
You pay a lot more close attention to this than I do, but just from the outside looking in, watching all the Modern discussion and seeing things online, it seems like it's kind of the Wild West at the moment. There's a lot of viable decks in Modern right now.
Yeah, that's an understatement. The meta is it is so unstable. Everything's bouncing around. There's so many things you can do, and I think it's just because of all the people, all the time that they had on their hands to sit there and decide what they wanted to do, brew stuff, and it just opened up a multitude of possibilities. And with the inclusion of Modern Horizons 2, that adds even more. So.
Is that fun? It looks like that would be fun, but I guess as someone who doesn't play that often, is it fun having things be that open-ended currently?
It's not bad. It's hard to debate what to play. And
sure.
You only get 15 cards in a sideboard, so it's hard to debate what you need to, bring in or cut out of a deck. The biggest thing that I noticed about it, though, is it feels like it's the same exact thing that you're playing, just different cards. So, for instance, Ragavan's a huge card. And yes, it's got different abilities, but it still feels like an aggro-ish deck, like a Delver of Secrets is what it feels like coming at you. So, I mean, it's the same concept of what's happening, just different cards doing it.
Okay, sure, that makes sense. Well, if you out there in a listener land want to reach out to us and tell us about your experiences playing games or even other formats like what you're doing in something like Modern right now, how would you go about doing that, Chris?
You can find us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central. You can find us online at cmdrcentral.com, and you can also find us on YouTube by searching CMDR Central.
You can also head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central and check out our reward tiers, such as a Decks You Play show, or just joining our community to chat with us and play some virtual EDH.
Yes, indeed. We have a really busy online community on the Slack of people playing games very regularly on Spelltable. It's been actually pretty cool to see.
Yeah. We also have a bunch of new people to say hello and welcome to.
All right.
So we want to say hello and welcome to Andrew Hang, Kyle Kohler, and Michael Field.
Thank you to all three of you, and thank you to all our existing Patreon supporters. We appreciate it, and we appreciate everyone out there who just supports us by listening and clicking those upvote buttons. That means a lot as well. So thanks to everybody. Chris, before we jump into this main show topic, you are our resident D&D person, but you weren't around when we did our couple of D&D set reviews. So I just want to ask you what you thought of that set as a whole, having seen all of the cards and stuff now.
So how are we discussing this? Like, as a whole, as did it stay true to the D&D theme, or is it a magic theme, or what? Because as a set overall, it's trash.
As a set overall, it feels relatively... I mean, it feels like a core set, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, which it is. It's definitely relatively weak. Did you like the D&D aspect of it, first of all? I would say that's what I'm most interested in, because you are someone who knows the material much better than we do.
I do to a point. I was very disappointed with Wizards in the fact that we did not receive the party mechanic, because it's the whole theme of D&D is that you are a party doing things. The other thing that kind of disappointed me was this whole dungeon delving thing, because it's not really viable in other formats, because it's very slow. So it's viable in your standard, it's viable in your sealed. Not sure if it's viable in Commander. Yes, it seems like they're pushing it with some of the new Commander cards and whatnot, but it just doesn't feel good type of deal. The overall character building of things, like the named characters that they built and they did everything, it seems okay at best.
Okay.
A couple of them are really good, like, Volo's broken, and I hate that card with a passion, but that's another story. Overall, I like, the character design and everything like that. I like the dice rolling a lot. I love that aspect of the game, because it adds more of a randomness to the game, because you're going to get such and such a result, and it makes the game more enjoyable overall, in my opinion. For a set overall, like I said, I think the set's trash. Now, in a sealed environment or a limited environment, it's awesome. But adding, there's few good cards in it, like good mechanics that came in, that could be viable and other stuff. But overall, I don't know, I thought they could have done better. I was hoping this would have been more of an Origins type set, where it just blew things wide open, amazing, and it just didn't feel that way. It kind of felt like I'm going to have everyone hate me when I say this, but it felt like a Walking Dead thing that just kind of got brought into Magic again.
Yeah, I think I would have more harshly judged the power level of the set if I hadn't felt like we've gotten 14 sets already this year, all of which were pushed to the max.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
So instead looking, because I remember, going back doing like when Core 15 or Core 14 came out and going over those sets, we weren't doing reviews, but I just like looking at cards for decks. I'd be like, well, there's 2 cards from this whole set I want for any of my decks, and being disappointed in that kind of thing, right? And disappointed in the core sets, because that's just how they were back then. Whereas today, when I look at it, I'm like, I'm only going to put a few cards in this set of my decks. I feel like, oh, phew, I get to not have to worry about buying a bunch of singles for decks. So I think what has happened this year around this set has changed my perspective. Instead of being disappointed because, we're only getting 4 sets a year and one of them isn't very strong, that's a little bit of a letdown. Instead, it's just a relief versus being disappointed.
Yes, that's for sure. I like their new arts that they're doing too, like the original, like the throwbacks to old school book covers and whatnot.
Yeah, those look great.
I did like that, but I don't like the fact that Wizards pushes so much for this alternate art stuff. It seems like they're trying too hard. Like, we all came into the game, we love the game as it was, so why are you pushing so hard for other things? That part I just don't understand.
It makes me think of, there's that line in the Incredibles movie where I think it's the villain makes the comment, where if everybody has powers or everybody's special, nobody is.
Yes.
That's kind of how I feel a little bit about all the alternative arts, even though I like both the throwback arts and the ones that look like kind of monster manual covers. I like those a lot. If every set has 5 pieces of cool alternate art, then it kind of ceases to matter, because everything is an alternate art at that point.
Agreed.
So, I'm with you there too. It's a little bit exhausting. It's exhausting. That's the way I would phrase it. It was fun getting expeditions and inventions and stuff when you got one of those things a year. When you get 30 different variants, and that's not an exaggeration.
Well, and it's the whole fact of them doing collector boosters too, where they become more viable to find. Whereas expeditions were in the packs, and your chances of pulling was 1 in maybe 2 in a case if you were lucky. So
yeah,
I mean, it was
when you saw them, it was a big deal.
Yeah, it was a rare card, which is the whole point. Is you want rarity to make things look cooler.
Yeah, and it also it felt like having a few of those bomb or rare cards sprinkled throughout like that. It kept kind of the price of the set down too, because it just jacked up the value of one box or a case or something if you found a couple of them. So it kind of kept the average cards down if you were someone who cared about that a little bit.
Yeah, because more
this
cards
doesn't seem to
correct.
do that really.
Yeah.
All right, that's enough complaining about that, because I think we're all kind of on the same page there as well.
We could go on for hours about this one.
In the grand scheme of things, too, like that doesn't really, like, the cards are still there, the alternate art. Yes, I think there's too much of it, and this set is powered down, but it's a core set. I mean, it's not grand scheme of things, and those are relatively small things.
Yeah, that is true.
All right, so we're going to look at the Commander version of Forgotten Realms today, and we're just going to pick a handful of cards we like, because there's a gazillion of them, and we don't want to just do a show where we spend 30 seconds on 40 cards, so we're each going to pick a couple that we like, and we're going to start with some legends. And I'm going to start with you, Max. What of the legendary creatures here that can be your commanders jump out at you that you want to talk about?
I have 2 of them.
Okay.
The first one is Cloth Unrivaled Ancient. This is a legendary creature dragon. It's a 4/4 for 5 and Gruel. It has flying and haste, and then whenever it attacks, add X mana in any combination of colors, where X is the total power of attacking creatures. And then you can spend this mana only to cast spells until end of turn. You don't lose the mana as steps and phases end. So just a big mana generating commander. I really like this. I like the idea of maybe like doing a big X spell type deck with this. You put a bunch of dragons, big hefty boys to attack, and then just cast a giant like Jaya's emulating fire and smash face.
Sure. Yeah, I am totally on board with that. It's a dragon commander, but it's not kind of instructing you to play a bunch of dragons either. Your deck's kind of open-ended. Yeah, I was looking at this one and trying to figure out if I wanted to try it too for another Gruel deck or not. So I am a fan of this one for sure. Was this one of the ones you were thinking about building, Max, or is this just one you thought was interesting?
This is one I'm debating putting into paper, but I have this and the Dimir one from the actual set are the 2 that pique my interest the most so far.
Which Dimir one?
The one that lets you play top card of an opponent's library.
Xanathar?
The Beholder.
Yeah.
I might have a foil time-stamped one of those if you're interested.
Ooh, well,
nice.
That just tipped the scale, maybe.
How about you, Chris? Any of these you want to talk about?
For Legends? Legends, yeah. Wonderful cards. So I'm going to go into the Gruel version of this stuff too, and I'm going to talk about Vrondis, Rage of Ancient. Vrondis is a Dragonborn Barbarian. I'm very disappointed that they didn't say Dragonborn. They just say Dragon Barbarian. Another thing that makes me mad, but we'll get off of that. Vrondis is a 5/4. Vrondis also has an ability of Enrage. Now, whenever Vrondis, Rage of the Ancients, is dealt damage, you may create a 5/4 red and green dragon spirit creature token with when this creature deals damage, you sacrifice it. And whenever you roll 1 or more dice, you may have Vrondis deal 1 damage to itself. The reason that I like this card is because I took this set as, a D&D aspect, and like I was talking about earlier, is I like the dice rolling aspect. So the ability, to build a deck around rolling dice to get random, whatever generated stuff that's going to happen, then this is going to build into that. You're going to shoot him for 1, you're going to do that. You could go the route and play all the little pyromancers that shoot each other and anything else like Pyrohemia or any of the red spells that actually deal damage to creatures and just start creating more and more dragons. You can go that route too, but I'd prefer to go more of the dice rolling route. And that's why I chose Vrondis as the general that I like the most out of everything.
It's definitely a interesting aggro commander for sure. And similar to the dragon Max was talking about, it's not like forcing you to go on a particular path. I feel like, what was the mechanic from Ixalan where when a creature is dealt damage,
it's Enrage.
It was Enrage, okay, yeah. Like Enrage, you definitely would be a way you could build this for sure, but like you wouldn't have to necessarily. There's a lot of goofy things you could do with it, like the Pyrohemia style builds, just to have that in the deck as well as doing other things. I think it's a super cool commander.
Yeah, and the thing I like about it too is that those tokens, they're not going to stick around forever, because if they deal damage once, you sacrifice them. So it's not going to, if someone reads this card and is logically thinking, they're not going to deem this the high threat commander of the table, because it's like, well, I can just block with flyers, or I can, ping them for 1 and they're just going to disappear anyways. So it doesn't matter about the tokens, so I just think that this would be a cool little theme to play.
Well, and I do kind of like the restriction that if they take damage, they get sacrificed, because it does keep, it forces you to play a little bit smarter. You're not like you have to work around that variant in some way. Maybe it's just running a Dolmen Gate so creatures don't take combat damage or something, but like you still have to work around it versus like just getting a ton of value with no downside.
Yeah, because you can't, have like 5 dragons out and then slap an Anger of the Gods down to create more, because it's just going to kill all your dragons anyways.
Yeah, and there's, you could, if you played Heroic Intervention with it, but you have to like, be clever and find workarounds to make that succeed.
Yes.
So I'm a fan of that, definitely. The first one I want to mention here is Prosper,
the best one. The best one.
Probably. 2 black and a red for a Tiefling Warlock. It's a 1/4 with Death Touch. It has 2 abilities. First is called Mystic Arcanum. At the beginning of your end step, exile the top card of your library, and until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. So it's just a kind of a red impulse draw. And the second one is whenever you play a card from exile, you make a treasure token. We've seen that a little bit on a couple of red commanders that were available in the Strixhaven set, where like they got a +1 counter on them when a card came from exile or whatever. But the fact that this is black and red, not just mono red, because there's so much more stuff you can do by having access to 2 colors in particular. And, putting counters on a commander is good, but it also kind of makes you have to go down the road of attacking with that commander to take full advantage of that ability. If your commander isn't swinging with those counters on it, like you've put them on it and it's not really done anything. Making treasure tokens is a whole different thing. There's a bunch of stuff you can do with treasure tokens that is really, really useful. So like not only is this in 2 colors, it's doing a thing that's much more universally useful.
Yes, and a lot of the good, recurable red card draw exiles cards, and then you can play it, till the end of turn or whatever. So then this is just triggering to create more tokens. So you already have the theme built in, and why not just slap a commander that does everything that you need to do right there?
And you even have things like Uba Mask from, I think it was in the Kamigawa block, where whenever you draw a spell, the card gets exiled and you can cast it from exile until end of turn. Basically, it's keeping people from drawing it. It was designed to keep people from drawing a ton of cards in a turn, because you can only use them the turn you draw them. So if you draw 10 cards, well, they're going to stay in exile unless you can cast them that turn. Well, in the case of Prosper, it's going to let you turn even your first draw step into a card that gets exiled that you can cast from exile. So while kind of hosing everybody else who wants to draw multiple cards per turn.
Yeah.
But it's also not crazy unfair. It's a really nice thing to have in Prosper, but it's not like a, Teferi's Puzzle Box in a Wheel Commander deck or something. It's cool, but it's not busted, I don't think. So I think this is just a neat design, and it's something that's kind of unique. Like, this deck is going to look probably quite a bit different than most Rakdos decks, and I like that.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Max, you said you had one more you thought was kind of fun?
I do. It's another multicolored one. It's Galia, Kindler of Hope. This is the Bant legendary elf knight. It's 1 in Bant for a 4/4. It has Vigilance, and it has a couple abilities. First being, you may look at the top card of your library at any time. And the second is, you may cast aura and equipment spells from the top of your library. When you cast an equipment spell this way, it gains when this equipment enters the battlefield. Attach it to target creature you control. I like this for the aura half of the ability, just because I have a Tuvasa deck, and this is probably going to get a slot to try it out. It's not going to replace Tuvasa, but it definitely is a cool body that interacts with all my auras. What I find odd is Wizards really splitting that path of aura and equipment on a commander. Like, I get this is a precon deck. The whole deck is built around it, but I feel like they should really just pick one way or the other and stick with it versus trying to have players do both.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I feel like if I was playing this as my commander, for whatever reason, I would pick one or the other. I would definitely lean into auras or equipment. I wouldn't try to run both, and I think they're hoping you do. I agree. You're better served running one or the other. And an example of that would be, you're going to put it in your Tuvasa deck with no equipment, because the aura half is good enough.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a neat design, and I do think even as an aura commander, it's different enough from the Tuvasa kind of things that we have out there that it's probably worth playing. And there's really nothing in Bant colors that cares about equipment. You could build Rafik equipment I've seen before, but Rafik doesn't care about equipment necessarily. This is the kind of thing that was going to encourage you to do that in Bant colors, which is a fun thing that nothing else is doing. So I like that. All right, let's talk about some of the cards in the 99 here that we think are interesting. The first one I'm going to mention is Rod of Absorption. It's 2 and a blue for an artifact. Whenever a player, not you, and I misread this at first. I thought it was just you, but whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, exile it instead of putting it into a graveyard as it resolves. So number one, that's a pretty decent piece of kind of graveyard hate. It's probably not going to do any good against someone's Reanimator deck, but like there's plenty of Spellslinger decks, Kess for example, that are just going to get shut off in large part because of this. I wouldn't run it just for that purpose, but like you're going to accidentally turn off some pretty powerful decks once in a while just by having this out. However, it also says X and tap, sacrifice Rod of Absorption. You may cast any number of spells from among the exiled cards, total mana value X or less without paying their mana cost. So this isn't probably a thing you're going to want to run and use this ability if you are playing in a deck with a bunch of like, giant extra spells or things like that. But using my Tyrant deck, for example, it's the kind of thing where, okay, I'll put it in my graveyard, and even just looking at my own stuff in a couple turns, sacrifice this for 4 mana or whatever and cast a Ponder and a Preordain and a Brainstorm and something else, get 4 free casts basically of things out of my graveyard for nothing, basically 1 spell letting me do that. That's pretty cool, and that's not even counting if someone else has cast a Swords to Plowshares along the way or any of their draw spells that I now have access to. I think it's got a lot of utility in the right deck. I think you probably want to run it in your deck. Maybe you want to run it in your Kess deck or something. I think you probably don't because it will fight with Kess, but like that style deck where you have a bunch of small kind of spells, it's just going to give you a second crack at them relatively efficiently while also maybe grabbing some other good stuff from other people.
Yeah, the card is definitely powerful. I mean, no matter which way you look at it, if you're doing it to your opponents or if you're doing it just to break your own cards, it's extremely powerful. Even
if you're just grabbing a 1 mana spell, 3 mana to cast this and like 1 mana to use it after you cast it is not a terrible cost if you're just getting like one thing out of there for 1 mana.
Well, you talk about Passing Flames, it's similar, concept. It's 4 mana to cast it to get, whatever spells you can cast back from it, so.
Yeah.
And I think this is how it works. There's no comprehensive rule text for this card yet, but I think once you do the sacrifice part, the cards that you do cast go to the graveyard. So you do essentially get them back. They don't re-exile on resolution. This isn't flashback.
Oh, good point. No, you're right. So maybe then the Kess deck would want to use it because it gives you basically a second bite of that apple. You can cast them, put them back in the graveyard, and then use Kess to cast them.
Yeah.
See, maybe it would want it. Yeah, I think it's a fun card. It's a neat design. I like things like this. So that's my first one. What's your first one here, Chris?
My first one is a wonderful, wonderful card. It's called Hurl Through the Abysses of the Naughtiness and the Down Below Earth and all that fun jazz. I don't want to say it because we're a family-friendly program and we don't swear on this program. So,
if your kid is listening, it would be Hurl Through HE double toothpicks.
There we go. Hockey sticks are going on.
Yep.
So this card costs 2 colorless and a black and a red, and it's instant. And it reads, exile target creature. Until the end of your next turn, you may cast that card, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. I just like this card in general, due to the fact that I think of other cards that are similar CMC, your Vraska's Contempt. There was another one recently that did something similar to that, where I think you gained life or something.
I forget what it's called. Yeah,
I mean, all around that 4 CMC mark, that's an exile a creature or a planeswalker or something. This doesn't hit planeswalkers, but that's fine because you have the staple text of being able to cast that creature. Now, in Commander, a lot of times, when you cast a card that's 4 CMC like this, you're going to blow up something huge. So then it allows you to the next turn cast it and take the advantage of what that card was doing for someone else. And that's what I like about it the most.
And the important part there is probably the end of your next turn, too. It's because these kind of things get tricky if it's that turn where, okay, I'm putting 4 mana on this. How much mana do I still have available to cast that creature? You have next turn to do that. So you can hit that big creature this turn, and then next turn cast it when you've untapped and have all your mana again. That's a really useful part of this for sure.
Yeah, and worst case scenario, you don't do it, and you're still exiling a creature for 4 mana. I mean, I just like having the versatility of being able to do something else if need be.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Vraska's Contempt is in multiple thousand decks on EDH Rec, and this is just a worst case scenario. It's kind of the black-red version of that. Even if you don't cast it, that's a good enough rate for Vraska's Contempt. Having access to cast it then afterwards is a really big upside.
Yeah, I agree.
Max, what's your first card here?
My first card is Wand of Orcas. This is a legendary artifact equipment for 2 and a black. Whenever equipped creature attacks or blocks, it and zombies you control gain death touch until end of turn. And then whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, and it has an equip cost of 3. I like equipment that makes bodies, and this is a lot of bodies if you put it on your commander and you hit for 5, or you put it on, anything with a good chunk of power, you're making 1 body, 2 bodies. The fact that it also provides some sort of evasion by giving your creature death touch and other zombies you control. Zombies is a great tribe in EDH, so I feel like this just goes in a lot of those decks. And the art's just super sick. I think that's really why I like this card.
Even if it didn't have the bit where equipped creatures, where zombies you control gain death touch, I think just making zombies for each point of damage you deal on a piece of equipment is pretty good all by itself, particularly if you're like in some kind of deck where your commander regularly has evasion, or you're playing a black-blue rogue deck or something. That's really, really solid all by itself. Having the ability to give all those zombies, or if you happen to be playing a zombie deck, just give your whole team death touch is that much better. This is a really, really good card. I like it a lot.
Yep, I'm going to have to hunt this one down too for one of my decks.
Chris, what's your first card here?
Let's talk about well, we talked about zombies. How about we talk about skeletons? How does that sound? Skeletons sound good?
Yeah, let's do it.
I guess. Technically, this card has nothing to do with skeletons, but it is a skeleton, and it is a Death Tyrant, which is a 4/6 Beholder skeleton that costs you 4 generic and a black to cast. Death Tyrant has Menace, and it also has an ability that reads Negative Energy Cone. Special, wah, 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 wah. Everyone's going to be, in a world of pain here. So, Negative Energy Cone, the ability reads, whenever an attacking creature you control or a blocking creature an opponent controls dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Now, Death Tyrant also has the ability for 5 generic and a black to return it from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. I like this a lot because a lot of times when I see people playing token decks or anything of that sort, they're kind of, like they look across the board and they're like, well, this guy could block, do this or do that. Well, with a card like this, you don't really have to worry about it because you just send them in anyways. It's like, okay, block as many. I'm only going to get in with 1 guy for 2 damage, but all my creatures are going to die and I'm just going to create more. And that's all that matters to me is I'm just going to create more. They're going to replace themselves so I can just start swinging willy-nilly whenever I want, wherever I want, and go to town. And then, being able to bring Death Tyrant back if someone kills them, so unless it gets exiled, it's just going to keep coming back and keep creating more and more zombies, which is quite an annoyance, but I think is awesome at the same time.
Is this one something the kind of thing that you're interested in, Max, at all?
Maybe. It's 5 mana. It does have Menace. Yeah. And it has a beefy body, so I might try it in like Regnan Krav, since it's going to be... I already do enough sacrificing, but, the fact that they have to be attacking, I really don't like swinging with a bunch of tokens and eating them in the middle of combat, unless they are being blocked or something. So I feel like this might be something I'd have to really test to find out if it works in that deck.
Yeah, that was what I was wondering. That's the deck I was thinking of for you too, was Regnan Krav. But like you said, that is a good amount of mana for that deck, and you do tend to play most of the stuff in that deck is pretty low to the ground. So, but yeah, I think it's a cool card for sure. The next one I want to talk about here quickly is Hellish Rebuke. It's 2 and a black for an instant. Until end of turn, permanents your opponent's control gain. When this permanent deals damage to the player who cast Hellish Rebuke, sacrifice this permanent, and you lose 2 life. So you can use it to kill creatures that are hitting you, and they have to hit you. So like you're not getting out of taking damage. You're going to take damage, and they have to sacrifice them, and they lose life as well. The great way to cast this is if somebody hits you with 10 1/1s, then you're taking 10 damage, and then you cast this, and their controller loses 20. Basically, if they lose a life for each one they have to sacrifice. That's the ideal use of it, but it's not just creatures either. Like if someone has an effect or something that's dealing damage to you, you can just cast this in response and force them to sacrifice it. It's kind of a way you're going to have in mono black to deal with some kind of an artifact that's causing you problems or an enchantment that's causing you problems. If someone has a Throne of the God Pharaoh, for example, in some kind of a token deck, and at the end of the turn you're going to take 8 damage from that, and you have no way to deal with it because it's an artifact and you're in mono black, well, this is a way for you to deal with it. maybe not the ideal way, but like this is the kind of card that has a bunch of uses in a game. It might be to take out some stuff that's hitting you in terms of creatures. It might be to deal with an enchantment or artifact that's a problem. Even a planeswalker that's plinking you for damage or something. There's just a lot of things you can use this to remove, which I think is a really fun, cool design. I don't know what deck I'm going to put it in, but I'm 100% going to test it out in some deck because I think the versatility on this card is really, really useful.
I think the card's dumb.
No.
I think it's dumb. Don't like it at all because it's going to screw me one day and I know it. It's coming. Bad.
Well, so you're right though. Like that is going to happen where you're going to hold it in a hand and you're going to think, okay, this person's going to swing at me, and you're like going to leave yourself open or something because okay, they'll hit me and I'll make them lose all their stuff and lose all their life, and then they'll cast a Crater Hoof or something, and you're like, oh, well, that's now pointless because now I'm just going to die.
Yep. Yeah.
So yeah, that will for sure happen. But yeah, I think it's the open-endedness is something I quite like.
It is a very good card overall. I'm just thinking in terms, of this wonderful deck I play that's called, Mogus, Goddess Slaughter. And someone casts this, and I'm just like, well,
sure.
There goes my board. That sucks.
Well, Max, how about you? What's your next one here?
I am going to talk about a red card.
Yep.
What?
Best color in Magic. I hear you fools were talking, trash about red, when I wasn't on.
I did not talk trash about red while you were gone. This time. I had a lot of red cards in our set review that I talked about, quite honestly. But I want to talk about Maddening Hex. This is a new curse for one red. You enchant a player, and then whenever enchanted player casts a non-creature spell, roll a d6. Maddening Hex deals damage to that player equal to the result, then attach Maddening Hex to another one of your opponents chosen at random. I kind of like what Chris said about some of the die rolling stuff. This adds that random element. It adds a little bit of the Vial Smasher effect on an opponent for a turn, essentially. And I can kind of see this getting crazy, and at the right time, this might stop like a counter spell war. Because if you cast a counter spell, this is going to trigger. Then you move it to someone else, and if they want to counter it, it's pretty situational. But I could see this either preventing people from using counter magic, or I just kind of also want to see it go back and forth against all my opponents on a turn.
Well, in the way it works, because you only get hit the one time with it before moving it to somebody else, first of all, your opponents are never incentivized really to remove it necessarily because it's on you, but maybe you aren't either because you're like, well, I'm going to eat one roll of the d6 and then I'll move to somebody else. Is it worth wasting my disenchant on this? I'm just going to eat the, at most 6 damage, but it could be 1, could be 2 or something, and it'll go to somebody else and become their problem, and then maybe it won't go back to me. Maybe it'll go to the third person or something. So like maybe you yourself don't want to remove it either. I could totally see this bouncing around a board and dealing all kinds of damage because nobody can quite justify removing it.
Seems like my kind of card.
I was going to say...
Speaking of Mogus.
Yeah.
The hard part is, though, for all of us in general, we discuss these cards and all that, and they sound good for us, to put into decks. But as us and, millions of other players have the issue of our decks have so many cards in them already, you don't know what to cut anymore. So now you're
making cuts is miserable.
Yeah, you're just losing your mind looking at like, this would be awesome, but what do I cut? And it's getting down to the point where I'm going to sit down at a table one day and be like, so my deck's 110 cards. Are you guys okay with that? Is that fine?
Right. Yeah. Man, it would not bother me at all to see them up the limit on what decks could be for sure.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to talk about an enchantment as well here. It is not an aura curse, it is just an aura. It is called Mantle of the Ancients. It is 3 white, enchant creature you control. When Mantle of the Ancients enters the battlefield, return any number of target aura and or equipment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to enchanted creature. And the enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each aura and equipment card attached to it. So it's a replenish costs 4 mana. This is 5 mana. It's only going to bring back auras, not all enchantments like replenish. It's also going to be $2 versus 100 like replenish. That's a big deal. But it's going to buff your creature too. Like this is going to, if you're playing a deck with some amount of auras or equipment in it, it's going to stick to your creature. It's going to bring those things back that people have been destroying all game or maybe just destroyed last turn with an austere command or something. And it's going to buff the creature beyond what it was already at. I will probably not run it in my equipment deck just because I'm sticking more to equipment, and even though it brings equipment back, I just don't think I want any auras in that deck. But I'm going to put it in my Sigarda Enchantress deck for sure. Being able to bring back just a couple of auras is probably worthwhile. That's going to give my creature, +2, +2, +3, +3 or something along the way just for doing that. I'm definitely going to try it out there at least. 5 mana is a little more than I would like ideally, but those kind of effects that bring those things back and attach them without having to pay the cost are really, really nice. So I'm going to test it in a deck that does have Replenish anyway. Like I was lucky enough to get a Replenish when one was cheap for that deck, so I have one. And I'm still going to run this, I think, to try it out.
I'm interested to see how you like it, because I don't like this card at all.
The problem, I think, what's going to happen is, take my Sigarda deck, for example. If I have auras in the graveyard, it's probably because someone has blown Sigarda up once or twice.
Yep.
In which case, I'm probably not doing great anyway, because the game's got to that point where someone's been able to do that. So, yes, that would be my concern, Max, is we're going to get there, and it's not going to have anything in the graveyard to bring back. But I feel like if that's the case, I'm still probably going to have a few auras on her. So, like, worst case, it's going to give her +3, +3, or +4, +4 or something. And I won't feel terrible about doing that when the upside is much higher than that. Like, I think that's the worst case scenario. Is it's going to be a 5-mana enchantment that gives her +3, +3. Not great, but, like, I can deal with that. I'll take that when the ceiling is much higher.
Okay, yeah, and Sigarda with the baked-in native hexproof helps this card a lot. Like,
yeah.
Because, like, my thought for Tuvasa, no natural hexproof. This is 1 more mana than Retether, and I run that. That's a sorcery that brings all auras back from your graveyard. I'm so afraid of being 2-for-1 with this. Like, I'll cast this, and Tuvasa goes away, and there's no target. Or they do it with the battle, the ETB on the stack, and then Tuvasa's gone. And, I like the card, I'm so worried about it being almost too much. Like, yeah, Replenish is really good. It's a great card. Retether's a great card. But I feel like and now you add this card, I feel like out of all 3 of them, this one requires the most setup. Like, you want a stacked graveyard. You want a creature with something already on it. I would definitely run it, though, in, like, an equipment deck, because you're saving so much mana, on those equipped costs, just alone. So I would definitely run it in more of probably an equipment deck versus an aura deck, but that's just me personally.
Yeah, the thing about being susceptible to the 2 versus 1 is a big problem for sure. Like, you cast as someone removes your thing, then it just fizzles and you're all 5 mana. That is always a concern with the auras, but like when you're casting a 1 mana aura, it's way less worrisome than you're casting one that costs 5.
Right. And, the benefit of bringing all the equipment back, even if your creature gets removed with the trigger there, you can still get all those equipment back on the battlefield. Like, that's I feel like more value versus, all these auras don't have a target anymore. See ya, they go back to the yard.
Yeah, the equipment just fall off and stay there in play. So you've at least brought them back, as long as they came in and played and hit it at least.
Right.
Yeah, I totally hear that. Chris, what's your next one here?
My next one is within the wonderful color of red, and it is called Berserkers Frenzy. This is an instant speed spell for 2 generic and a red, and it reads, cast this spell only before combat or during combat, but before blockers are declared. It also reads that you roll at advantage, for those of you D&D nerds out there who know what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't know, it's where you roll 2d20 and you ignore the lower roll. So the results are as such: 1 through 14, you choose any number of creatures. They block this turn if able. 15 through 20, you choose you choose which creatures block this turn and how those creatures block. I've always liked cards like this that allow you to interject yourself into someone else's combat step. Like, I'm not saying that they're attacking you, they're attacking someone else. So you're forcing the other person to block. So, you're getting value out of it, You're putting your own say in how the game is being dictated, during opponent's turns. I also love this card because you are rolling dice, because dice is all what the set was meant to be about. So, and also being able to roll at advantage is huge. For any of those who do play D&D, you know how good advantage is and how you actually usually get higher rolls. Now, I have had, those times, as I'm sure we all have, where you roll double 1s and you hate your life. And at that point, the DM just laughs at you and, is like, oh, I'm going to write this down for later use or something.
All your weapons break, you lost your bag that carried them, and now, the party said go away.
Yeah, that is that. Man, if a DM did that to me, I don't know what I'd do. I'd be like, okay, fine. I'm going to go on a hobo streak and start hunting you guys down. That's what's going to happen here. But no, I love cards like this, and this is in red, and red doesn't have a whole lot of, abilities per se that other colors do to, kind of dictate game flow and control what other people are doing. So ability to try to do that is always fun. Now, a lot of times it really isn't going to pay off too much, because they're going to, usually the person who's attacking someone, they usually have a way of getting through. They're not just attacking willy-nilly, so you can't really force blockers. But it would be nice, sometimes you can just, well, I'm going to declare attacks, and you see the guys at like 70 life or something. They're like, well, I'm not going to block or something. You're just going to be, well, I can just make him block then, and get rid of the creature. So, I mean, that could be an aspect that could be played in this. What are you guys' thoughts?
I think being able to mess with your opponent's plans is almost always really useful, especially in red where you can't do it nearly as easily as you can in like blue.
Yes.
So forcing someone to block when they think they're not going to, like an Enchantress deck, I'm never going to block with my Argothian Enchantress or my Verduran Enchantress. I'd rather take 10 damage than lose my card draw engines. Being able to force those creatures to block, and those kind of decks like usually don't have ways to tap things at instant speed or something. So that's really, really good. It's like a weird removal option you kind of have here. So yeah, I like that a lot. And you don't even need usually to hit the 15 or 20.
No.
Like just forcing a creature to block is particularly when we're talking about things like that. Like I'm going to make your weak creature that is giving your team some kind of a big advantage. I'm going to force that thing to block is good enough. Swinging at me in my Tyrant deck and forcing Tyrant to block, it doesn't really matter what the block is. He's going to die for the most part with whatever you're swinging with. That kind of thing I think is really, really useful.
Yeah, the upside, if you do hit way up high, you can choose and just be like, well, I'm going to send all these blockers are going to block this one, and you're going to take 40 damage from the rest of the creatures that are coming through type of deal.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. It's a very cool card, and it's a unique, weird thing that throws off everyone's plans. I like that. Max, we'll go back to you for another one here.
Okay, my next one is going to be Dance Macabre. This is a sorcery for 3 black, and it says, each player sacrifices a non-token creature. Then you roll a d20 and add the toughness of the creature you sacrificed this way, so more dice rolling. And then the results are as follows. If the result is a 1 through 14, return a creature card put into the graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. If it's 15 or higher, return up to 2 creature cards put into graveyards this way to the battlefield under our control. Just a cool way to get creatures back from a graveyard. Maybe they sacrifice that big bad creature that's in your way. Sure, if they sacrifice their commander, they can port it to the zone right away, but that you run the risk with that with a lot of stuff. But I just like this. It's not super oppressive, it's not a Grave Pact, it's not a Dictate Erebos. Yeah, it plays well with those cards, but I just think this is a cool way to, use the dice rolling mechanic in a reanimation spell.
Yeah, I agree. It's a weird implementation of that reanimation thing, but I think it's much more interesting than some of because we get reanimation spells every set, it feels like, for the most part, some kind of one. I think it's it's a fun way to implement that, for sure. The last one I want to talk about here is Drood of Purification, a card that I'm very glad isn't white, because I don't want to see Max blink this in Brago.
This card is probably the most powerful card I was reading out of all of them. I mean, I was surprised for the CMC cost to what it is. It's dumb.
Yeah. 3 and a green for a 2/3. When Drood of Purification enters the battlefield, starting with you, each player may choose an artifact or enchantment you don't control and destroy each permanent chosen this way. So you're probably only going to get 3 things, because whichever thing you choose for one of your opponent, they will probably choose that as well. But maybe not.
I wouldn't. I would choose something else and be like,
that's true.
We're just going to blow
that's a good
up
point.
so
You'll
much
choose somebody
stuff.
else's. Yeah. And maybe a deal will get made and everyone will be like, oh, well, I'll just pick this one treasure token. But that doesn't usually happen with Council's Judgment either. Usually everyone just tries to hurt each other. So you're going to take out 4 artifacts and enchantments with this thing. And that's even before you get to a rune deck blinking it or something, or someone copying it or cloning it. This is going to do a lot of work for the 4 mana that you're paying for it.
Yeah, it's also a creature, and creatures, there's many more cards to bring creatures back from the graveyard.
Yeah.
Or like you were talking about blinking them, because you could go into blue and start blinking it, and I mean, there's so many options with this card that, the ability to just use it multiple times makes it so powerful.
I mean, that Reclamation Sage pops up in a gazillion Muldrotha and Marin lists, so they can sacrifice it and replay it to, remove one artifact or enchantment. This is going to hit 3 or 4.
Yep.
For 1 more mana.
I'm going to screw this card up every time someone casts it.
I know it's going to be great.
Well, you've had 5 years now to figure out Council's Judgment.
And
you'll eventually get this one.
Yeah, so I'm 5 years behind the curve still, is what that just said.
Well, Chris, do you have one last card for us here before we wrap things up?
I could find one quick if you want me to. I mean, there's a couple of them that I like, but weren't noteworthy enough to really discuss, I really like Bag of Tricks. It's a fun, cute little card that you can do random stuff with it. The land, I can't even think of the name of the land, but you can pay 5 to sacrifice it to put a creature, planeswalker, artifact, or something else, X cards down in someone's library. I thought that card was cool because, it's just another removal spell, but built into a land type of deal. I mean, there are quite a few decent cards in here, but nothing that really, stood out to me that I'd really want to go, a mile long into.
The other one I kind of like, and the land is Underdark Rift you were talking about, okay. Chris. The other card I kind of thought was fun, or would be interesting, is Grim Heirling. That's a Tiefling Rogue, 3/2. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create 2 treasure tokens, This is, again, probably, it's a rogue, so this will probably be in every single one of those SIG Dimir rogue decks, because most of the stuff has unblockable in that deck. I mean, that's probably good enough. You're making 2 treasures every time you swing at somebody. But you can also spend black mana and sacrifice X treasures, and target creature gets -X till end of turn. So, that's going to give one creature -2/-2 just on the 2 treasure you make from something hitting. And if you have other ways to make treasure, or you stack them up over multiple turns, then you can really hit something large. But I think just making the treasures alone is pretty good on that card.
Yeah, I think they kept this really under control by making it the 1 or more clause on it versus whenever a creature deals combat damage.
Yeah.
So we don't have another Smothering Tithe incident here. But yeah, this was on my list as well. I like it. I like the art. And again,
art's great.
It's just another, like you said, another cool thing to do with treasures besides, hoard them to win with a Revel in Riches or use them to cast spells. It's just another cool way to use treasures.
I totally agree. Any final ones from you, Max, before we wrap this up?
No, not really. I think I kind of agree with Chris. There's a lot of cool cards here, but nothing nothing that super blows my mind. Yeah. I do think for what Wizards have started doing these precon commander decks with the standard sets, these are probably the best ones. And I don't know.
I would agree. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because of they just play so well with the standard set, or because we get 4 of them, 5 of them.
Right.
Is it because we got 4 instead of 2? Or is it just because there are cards in here that I actually want to play versus, the Kaldheim ones? I think there was 1 card, a couple of the elves I wanted, and 1 card from the Spirit one. I didn't get the Zendikar Rising ones, although Obun shows up a lot in certain pods I play in. So I definitely think this gives us the most cards I think we'll see moving forward out of these precon decks.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see if we get 4 more of these for both Innistrad sets this fall, or if they go back down to 2 or something. And if they have this many new cards, if they keep putting this many new cards in these decks, that's going to, that's just one more way we're going to get a ton of cards every single set. So that's good to have options. It's bad if you have to buy them all for decks. All right, I think that is going to wrap up episode 276 of Commander Central. We'll be back next week with another show. I am Dana. You can find me on the Twitterbirds at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max. And you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our show is edited by Rafael Garcia. You can find him at Ursa Bearwalker. And our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. Until next week, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.